right, welcome everyone to Hometown History. I'm Jamie.
I'm Domi.
And I'm Lorann Jacobs. I forgot who I was.
So this is a Hometown History episode that we're calling Tell All with Lorann Jacobs and the creation of York County's iconic sculptures. We're going to take you through a series of different sculpture tours around York, telling you a brief history of the monuments, and then we'll go back and forth asking her some of the history behind the monument and the backstory of how she created it.
Right. So I'm in charge of telling you where we're going on our tour today. And we are at Indian Steps Museum. So we're going to start with Native Americans here at Indian Steps. And then we're going to go to Hey Diddle Diddle and the Turtle Baby, which is children's art at Martin Library, which I'm sure some of you have seen. And it's also Lorann's favorite piece. And then we're going to talk about Sports and Brooks Robinson from Wellspan Park, the Industry and the Tinker in North George Street, which is another iconic piece that I'm sure you recognize, the many war-related monuments close to downtown York, Revolution in Lafayette at the Golden Plow Tavern, another one I'm sure you all recognize, and then the Workers, the Agricultural and Industrial Museum.
So we're going to be here for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, depending on questions at the end. So we'll go through our presentation, and then if you have any questions at the end, we'd love for you to ask them. She is prepared to answer them. And of course, as educators, we want you to walk away with this thesis, these takeaways. So first is that this is a story about sculptures, to be sure, but it's also a story about a sculptor. She's a rare woman in York County. She pioneered her craft against immense headwinds to make a mark on our story. She will go down in history. And it's, if you guys, spoiler alert, she's my grandma. So like, I'm really proud of her. But she's an amazing power force, which is great. But she's been the catalyst for the 21st century renaissance of York County's creative art community. And alongside some of the large-scale murals in York, her work showed that outdoor installations can enhance the streetscapes and add many layers of interest and energy to otherwise kind of routine places. And then finally, how we memorialize our history says a lot about us. And if you go through York, a large majority of them were made by this woman. And so it's interesting to hear why, as a community, we decided to pick those topics, and then also how she was able to construct them and the meaning and the symbolism behind all of them.
Right.
So a little bit about me. My name is Jamie Noerpel. I have a doctorate in American Studies right now, which is history. Right now I work for a nonprofit in downtown York called York County Safety Collab. Jim and I also have a website called Witnessing York. And then I have a blog through YDR called Wondering in York County.
Yeah, and I'm Domi Miller. I'm a Third Circuit Court of Appeals librarian, and I work in Harrisburg. But in my free time, I'm a Civil War reenactor with the 87th PA, and I run Preserving the History of Newberrytown.
So now is when you're busting out the wool, right?
Yes, yeah. And yes, it's hot.
And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't get to show pictures of, I'm going to call her Mom for the rest of the time today. If you read the article that was in YDR this past week, she had asked me a couple of years ago, she's like, Mom, that sounds weird. Like, just call me Lorann. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm your granddaughter. You raised someone that's way too stubborn. So I'm just going to call her Mom for the rest of the time. And that was me as a kid.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little about her background. So Lorann's work is in collections in over 20 different states, and it's overseas in countries like Ireland, Japan, Germany, and the Netherlands. She created more than 1,000 pieces during her career, and almost all are one of a kind. She grew up in Dallastown on Cherry Lane with 4 brothers and sisters, and her mother was named Jean Reisinger and worked as a nurse. Her father was Leonard Gickens, and he served in World War II and was an artist himself.
Yeah, so I called them Nan and Pop, Jean and Leonard Gickness. So I thought we would start by asking Mom, like, when did you first start creating art?
Well, Dad was a commercial artist, so I grew up in an art, with art all around me. And there were always papers and paints and pencils and crayons and things that you could do. And you weren't allowed to sit down unless you were reading a book. So, or making something. But Dad always pushed that creative energy.
And so he was a graphic artist before computers existed. So he would hand draw a lot of the like marketing and like billboards and stuff that you see out. He would hand draw a lot of it, right?
And he also did exploded manuals for engineering on air compressors and air conditioning units for nuclear submarines. So he was really talented because he drew all the nuts and bolts by hand. And now the computer can just do that. But he actually had a camera that you could walk inside the camera and you could develop a film right inside there, and he could manipulate the film. And I'm sorry I didn't learn more about the filmmaking part too.
And so Pop, though, my great-grandfather, he was first-generation American because his family came from Lithuania. And so he was born a son of an immigrant, and then he was in Baltimore is where he grew up, right? And so for him to come up then to Dallastown and then have his kids not be able to sit still unless they're reading or drawing, it showed the emphasis on education. Right.
And his parents met on the ship when they were coming over to America, and they paid $5 for their tickets. And, and I used to go down to Baltimore to visit, and all the Lithuanians had their own community, bakeries, everything. They didn't really learn much English because everything was there. But now I think it's all changed to Korean or whatever. Everybody's gone. But
and also, I think you grew up riding horses too, right?
I begged for a horse. I think when I was 13, my parents said, if you do your chores and you get an allowance and save your money, you can buy a horse. So I got a horse for, I think, $165. She might have been, I think they said she was 13 years old, but I know she was a lot older. But it was a great starter horse, and I just spent all my time with that horse. Yeah, I didn't really care about school. But it was good because it got me out. We went to 4-H club meetings, and it got me out with other kids, and we would ride horses together.
My next question then is you grew up in Dallastown and you live in Dallastown, but you moved out one time, right? What was that story like?
Oh, well, I moved out to the country, and let's see, I was turning around in the driveway of this house, and there was a for sale sign. And it wasn't much of a house. It was actually 6.5 acres for $9,000.
This is Snyder Corner, right?
Yeah, this is years and years ago, and I bought it, and my girls were like, "Oh, Mom, there's no bathroom. We can't live here." So, I mean, I remodeled, and then remodeling and having people work on that house. I knew everyone that I needed to really construct another house from scratch. So I contracted the house I have now, and I had bought that acre of land in Dallastown for $3,000 back in 1973, and just hung on to it. So it was I was always interested in kind of real estate, and then making money with art, stick it into some kind of real estate. So, art was really the motivation too for being able to do a lot of that.
I'm not surprised at all. So you're a visionary, if I can get it working. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, you're a visionary, and you mentioned that school wasn't necessarily the highest priority, so she didn't get a traditional degree, but she did spend some time in college at the Maryland Institute of Art and Design in Baltimore, and then at York College, but she never earned a degree, and she had to largely teach herself. So if you go into her basement, it's covered with images, and whenever she sees something she finds interesting, whether it's in a magazine or a newspaper, she cuts it out and she keeps it as inspiration.
Kind of jump in here a little bit because I wanted to show you what this looks like. So tell us about your design process. This is in your basement. And I grew up as a kid going down to her basement, and it was a little creepy. Dark.
The wax looks like blood.
There's red wax just dripping everywhere. There's skulls. And so what does this process look like for you?
Well, the skulls come from, I just love the skeletons. I love fossils. That's why this place is so amazing to me too also. But I would just save a photograph I liked if there was a pose that I liked, and that's what I'm working on now, a piece that I just liked. It was from a very old painting, and I thought, what a great pose. But or I'll save a picture of an ear, because when you're working on a piece, you know, it's really hard. You might be able to get one side, you know, and then to get the opposite side and flip that, it's like, you wouldn't realize how hard that is. But, you know, there's and sometimes I'll go through those photographs looking for one that I know it's here somewhere, but there's so many there. Yeah.
And you use wax, whereas most sculptors use what?
Well, I just skip, I guess back in the old days, they used to do a plaster and they'd refine it. They make a mold and they do another plaster and they keep going until they had it perfect. And now artists would work in clay, make a mold, and then the wax is made from the mold. I just skip those parts and work right in the wax and build the pieces, engineer them so they can go through the casting process. And I learned the engineering part working in a foundry. But pieces need to be hollow. They can't be when they're small, they can be cast solid. But when you get into larger pieces, you have to have the same uniform thickness. So when you do your casting, you don't get any imperfections. You hope that cross your fingers, hope that it comes out.
And for those of you who are present, we're going to get into now one of her first pieces. But if you want to pick that up, then of course be gentle. It is hollow underneath, so you can kind of get a sense of what she's talking about. I also wanted to point out one of your garden pieces. Here you can kind of see the juxtaposition of it in wax and then when it's cast in bronze.
Yeah.
Okay, so the sculpture that Jamie just talked about is on the table right here, and it's one of Lorann's earliest pieces. I think we said 1991. We looked at the date, and it's of a standing Native American with a spear in his hand and a fish here at Indian Steps. And here's a little history behind why this monument is here.
So in 1912, there was an attorney from York, and his name was John Edward Vandersloot, and he built what we're in right now, this cabin. It's actually, those of you who are online, this is Indian Steps Museum today. So he loved to hunt and fish and search for artifacts. He was an outdoorsman for sure. And so he felt like this location right along the side of the river was perfect for him. So he incorporated a lot of points in the architecture. So you can see that there's a lot of arrow points and then spearhead points. I believe it's about 10,000 pieces in all around the museum, which makes it really like a living artifact.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. And the country retreat ended up becoming a clubhouse for local lawyers and folks with a passion for indigenous culture. And in the 1940s, it was converted into the museum that you see today. And it functions as a memorial for Native Americans who lived along the river. And the Conservation Society, who operates the museum, was a part of Governor Gifford Pinchot's conservation movement during the Great Depression.
So where did it get its name? So thankfully, Judy has been fabulous. She works down here at Indian Steps Museum. She sent us this picture, which it looks like it's over there on the wall. So there were a series of rapids with a substantial drop that would have created a lot of hazard for the timber rafters who used the river in the 1700s. So shad fishermen, there's like two different schools of thought. One is that shad fishermen who went to the river in the spring, they would climb up on these outcrops and they reportedly carved the notches into it. But then we also heard that the Native Americans also carved the notches into it. So I've seen two different answers to that. I'd be curious then after this, if Judith, if you could give us your background on what you think actually happened.
Yeah, the surface of the rocks that the fishermen used at Indian Steps are underwater thanks to the Holtwood Dam, which is about a mile south of the museum and about where Colsonman Run enters the Susquehanna River. So there aren't any staircase steps per se, but although based on the abundance of fishing-related artifacts that we've found, we know that the Native Americans frequently fished in the area.
So this is one of your first pieces, and you said that you worked in a foundry. And I remember, like, when you grow up with a woman like this, like, my grandma is 70 and she welds and she like throws these huge pieces like into the back of her truck like it's nothing, and it's just very unique. But I remember her telling me a story about what it was like being a woman in the foundry in the 1980s.
You're right. Women didn't really fit in there. That was the consensus of the men that worked there. And since I was their kind of quality control person, they didn't like me very much. So. But actually working in the foundry was one of the best experiences that I've had because of the knowledge that I gained, as far as the production part of it. I still do that today. Yeah.
So some artists, when they create their pieces, they just drop them off, and then it has to be deconstructed and reworked, right? But like you do the entire process. So the people at the foundry like when you come in because you make their job a little bit easier, huh?
Oh, I guess. The last piece I took down there, I wasn't happy with one of the legs because I have to cut them up into pieces. And so I took it home with me. And there was only one person there when I left. It was late. And they didn't relay that to the other people that worked there. So I got this panic phone call. It was like, we're missing a leg. But it wasn't perfect. I spent all this time doing this to get it as close as I could so that when I get the casting, I'm happy with it. And I said, I can't run this. I have to take it home and patch it up a little bit. There were some holes in there that, they could be welded, but I didn't want to.
Extra work.
Yeah. Right.
And what foundry do you go to?
I am Lorann, and my foundry is Lorann, L-A-R-A-N, Lorann Bronze. They're in Chester. So I don't own my own foundry. It just sounds like it.
So now we'll get into your next piece, which is at Martin Library.
Yeah, so we have a little riddle. So this is audience participation. So fill in the rest of this Mother Goose nursery rhyme. Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon, and the little dog laughed to see such sport, and...
A plus.
Good
Everyone
job,
got
everybody.
it. So if you go to Martin Library, you will see this piece in the children's section. And if you look, it's actually 4 separate pieces, which makes it, again, kind of a neat collection.
And we did have this piece in the back of a Hometown History episode that we filmed there. So the Martin Library has been a destination for friends and family since its opening in 1935, and it was at the height of the Great Depression. So it served as a beacon for those without jobs and those without hope. Or the library provided free entertainment for people and information for those seeking a change in their occupation. And interestingly, libraries are busier during recessions. So I don't know if any of you knew that. And within the first 3 days of opening, 7,505 people visited Martin Library.
Oh,
so clearly, the place to be is Martin Library.
Now, this specific nursery rhyme actually dates back to the 1600s. So it's been told for hundreds of years, and it's a form of children's folklore. So my degree is in American Studies, and I did a lot of work within folklore. And so it's interesting that when you look at riddles like this, what it does is that it gives kids a formula to remember. So it works on their memorization, but they can also improvise and pass it along, which makes it special because it's not just uniform. So everybody can kind of make it their own. So telling stories and rhymes like this are a part of learning and help prepare a kid for the future.
Right. So for example, Humpty Dumpty teaches kids to be careful or else they could hurt themselves. And folklore also provides a level of social cohesiveness. In a society that's constantly changing, folklore such as riddles stabilizes our changing world, and we find it comforting.
Mm-hmm. So one of the sculptures at Martin Library was the inspiration for Mom to go into creating sculptures in the first place. So there you can see the kid's butt. That is Edith Parsons' turtle baby sculpture, and it's in the garden at Martin Library. So obviously, like as a folklorist and as an interviewer, I would pepper Mom with lots of questions, usually at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I remember one particular conversation we had. She told me that she remembers as a kid going to Martin Library and seeing the sculpture.
I did, and the face is just, it's got such great expression. And that artist, Edith Parsons, also has some pieces down at Brook Green Gardens, which is really special. And yeah, I saw that piece and I thought, oh, that is just gorgeous. Like, you know, how in the world was this done? Who did this? And I didn't find out for years and years until, you know, who really it actually was made by. But that was inspirational to see that beautiful piece.
And how does it feel now to have one of your pieces then right across from it?
Oh, I didn't know that's where she was going to go, but I'm happy that she ended up out. She's in good company. And you wouldn't believe it. My friend Karen worked for the library. She's here. And I was in Lancaster in some little shop, and I found these because there's some iron foundries in Lancaster. iron babies with the turtle babies. So I bought every one I could get my hands on, and I gave one to Karen, so she's got that.
Oh, that's cool. Oh. So moving on to our next sculpture, Brooke Robbins at Wellspan Park.
Yeah, so born in Arkansas, Brooks Robinson started his professional baseball career in 1955 with the the York White Roses. And 5 years later, he joined the Baltimore Orioles as their third baseman. And during his tenure, he set himself apart as an exceptional player, earning many awards.
So here are just some of them. So Brooks Robinson, he played in 18 major all-star games. He won a World Series. He earned 16 consecutive Gold Gloves and was elected on the first ballot to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame in 1983. He set career records for a third baseman of close to 3,000 games and at a .971 fielding average at the time he had the record. No longer anymore.
Quite impressive. So Robinson became the co-founder of the York Revolution, known today as Wellspan Park, in 2005. And the president of the York Revolution, Eric Menzer, said, whenever Brooks was here, he was incredibly gracious with the fans and particularly the young people. He never refused an autograph and he never acted annoyed that people were interrupting him. And Robinson died last year, 2023, at the age of 86.
So here's a picture of the sculpture that Mom made with Brooks Robinson and two children. What I'd like to focus on, Mom, is your eyes are concave. Whenever you make sculptures that their eyes are kind of sunk in, I was hoping that you could tell them why you do that.
Well, it works with the shadows when, the light hits that. I really picked that up from, I think, an artist I saw in Baltimore that had an old piece in the center of Charles Street where it splits up there in a garden. Can't think of his name. Some artists are really good with the eyes, and then I like the simplicity of the shadow. Working with the shadows, and it's just simple, and you can still get the expression across. And Brooks was this was done. Brooks didn't know this was being done for him, so I had to work from photographs and. I think Louis Appel probably set me up with that job, and Louis and Peter, I can't remember Peter Kirk. Oh, thank you. Peter came out to the house and would look at the sculpture that I was working on in clay in the living room there because it was easier to do that right inside the house. And he'd say, okay, that looks good. I'm happy with that. So, and then I met Brooks in person, and he was just absolutely so nice. And he stood there and signed every autograph until there were none left. So he was a great guy. And I got a letter from him, a handwritten letter, a couple of letters, but I got this one thanking me for the sculpture, and I almost threw it away because there was a golf course logo on the envelope, and I thought, oh, this is just a promotional thing from somebody that wants me to buy a house on a golf course or whatever. But I was floored when I opened it up, and it was a handwritten nice note from Brooks. So I have that framed somewhere.
Well, that's nice to hear, because in a world where we're reevaluating if we are going to keep sculptures around and if they really symbolize what we want to remember, the fact that we have this man and he was a positive force in York County and was just a good soul, I think it makes it feel good.
Right. He started with the York County team too, so he had it.
So one of the other questions I had for you also is that your work is extremely public. Sorry guys, we have thousands of people pass your work every day. So how does it feel to have such a public facing presence?
Actually, I don't think about it, really, to be honest, but it's nice to be, when you make a public piece, well, you put your soul out there, and maybe people don't like it, which is okay. You get a reaction, or they love it, which is great, and it becomes iconic, which is unbelievable. But it's just always been a thought of mine that I like to do art that goes out into public places. So,
instead of like in a gallery that no one sees.
Oh, I don't even have a gallery, that I'm with anymore. Yeah, it's just we go out and do shows and meet people. we'll be over at Longs Park Labor Day, and that might be one of the last ones we do. You know, I don't know what's the future's gonna bring, but it's great. You go out and you spend.
Wait, you said this one
3
might be your
days.
last Longs Park might be your last one?
I don't know.
You say that every time.
Yeah.
She says that every year. Like, I don't know if we're going to do this again. And every year she does it again.
Yeah, well, you go over there and I just ordered a 20-foot canopy top for my canopy, and I don't even know where the frame is. You know, that's somewhere in one of the garages. Yeah, you go over there and put all that together. I take plants. I grow my plants. I like to use them in my, you do your display. You can't just take your art. You have to have something to put it on. Or if you're a painter, you have to make your walls. So I had nice vases made by Cott Campson at York, and then I take plants that I keep in the house all year just for that one show.
Just that one show.
Yeah.
Before we get into then the Tinker, how do you feel since this picture is, there's so many pictures of people either by the Tinker or on the Tinker. Like, do you like when people grab your artwork? Like, if you were to see someone climbing on it, like, how would that make you feel?
Well, I don't like when they climb on things, and that's that's a challenge. I had made some steel pieces that were made for the garden for plants to climb on, and they had bars going across, and I changed that design because they were climbable, and I didn't want that time. But I don't mind them touching, and they put their arms around them. I think the piece down at the Plough Tavern, the Lafayette, I think on St. Patrick's Day, they put a green hat on him. So, that's kind of cute. I don't mind that.
So the Tinker is a cross between the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz and the Thinker. The bronze sculpture called The Tinker represents York County's rich industrial history. And we're a community filled with makers, builders, and of course, thinkers. So we're deft in creating with our hands, our minds, and our hearts. So here's a short story from one of our makers.
Yeah, we thought we would get in and tell you a little bit about a man named William Henry Hubley. So he worked for the Pennsylvania Furniture Company for about 47 years, starting the whole way back in 1902. So he worked for this one company for 47 years. If you look at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and ask the general American, guess what the average number of years someone spends at a company is?
25. 10.
I heard it. It's 4.
Oh.
Yeah, 4 years. Yep. And millennials, we're kind of guilty of that. If we don't like a place or if we want to mix it up, like we'll leave.
My brother just got a new job.
Really? Yeah. But William Hubley, he stayed at the same place for 47 years. And in fact, he loved his job so much that he only missed 10 days of work and was reportedly never late.
Oh, okay. So he's just trying to be a brown noser. Don't tell my boss. So Hubley contributed to the fine woodworking that came out of York County. And in fact, furniture making was a big business in our area in the early 1900s. And Hubley was one of those workers who crafted bedroom and dining room suites that traveled around the country and even internationally. More than just a laborer, he stayed in touch with the community. Everyone that he worked with called him the dean of Pennsylvania furniture. Cool. His co-workers would call him Willie, and reported that he would stay on the job for as long as he was physically able. He loved it so much. When do you think you'll stop doing art?
Oh, I don't want to stop. I take breaks in between, and I walk down in the basement and walk by my work table and think, oh, I should get back to this. But I just need to be inspired. And now, sometimes there's pressure if you're working on a project for someone else. You have to do it. But I like to just work at my own pace.
Right. So, Lorann, you've shared that the inspiration behind the Tinker came one day while you were sitting at your kitchen table with a pad and a pencil, and your mind wandered to Rodin, whose description of human includes pits and dents. So, is that why you chose to stay away from smooth surfaces with your art?
Well, we try to make them the surfaces as good as we can. It depends on the piece, but I was always kind of anal about that, and especially working on someone else's piece in the foundry had to be perfect. But going down to the museum in Philadelphia, the Rodin Museum, and I looked up close. Now you wouldn't even notice it, but I can see little imperfections in the surface of the casting, and I think, oh, okay, this is a fabulous piece, and that doesn't really affect the look of the whole overall piece. Yeah. So, but I still love all his pieces.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So now getting into some of the war monuments.
Right.
Yep.
So during the Second World War, York County stepped up by forming the York Plan here in York, and a collaborative defense initiative that laid the foundation of other communities to mimic. And more than 400 companies ended up pulling together here in York, sharing information and accessible machinery and labor, as well as their resources. And the Manufacturers Association would pair companies that could go after larger contracts.
I'm going to go back here for just a quick second,
Sure.
just to quote Jim. He said, once upon a time, there was a remote Pennsylvania community that rose to the challenge in World War II. In fact, it was the town that roared.
And that's York.
Yeah. And so here's one of my mom's monuments that is dedicated to the World War II veterans as well.
Yeah, and I want to mention that the York Plan's motto was to do what we can with what we have.
So tell us about those initial planning meetings. The scenes of like, all right, people are like, all right, well, we want to have a war, then what?
Well, I was in a meeting with Art Glatfelder and Lily Freeman and a few other gentlemen. I was really on the hot seat, you know. I had to come up with something good. And Art said, well, I want to pay for this. You know, I'll just pay for it. And I said, Art, you don't have to do that. We'll raise the money. Let's go out and raise money. We can do it. We raised more than we needed, so that the excess went into the York Foundation for maintenance, future maintenance on any of the pieces. And that's in some cities, that's a requirement, you know, but I knew that from working in the foundry. I would hear these things, but Art would, and I'd hear these stories, these war stories, since I was in there with all these veterans. And it was kind of really thrilling. And my original design had some faces in the flag too. And Art said, well, let's just keep it simple. You know, let's just do the flag. And I think I didn't tell you this. I think I had 58 stars on there, and I had to kind of, I was just maybe putting stars on this, and when I count them, I thought, oh no, I have to change this a little. Yeah.
Overly ambitious.
Yeah, you know what you said about quality control, right?
Right. It was overload.
So Powell's Park is a 1-acre off-leash dog recreation park along the rail trail. And along one of the corners, you'll find Lorann's pal. So what's the story behind the dog sculpture?
Well, he was Art's dog from the service, and somehow Art was able to bring him home with him. Usually that's not the case. And his job was to alert. You know, he went out with the men when they go out on recon, and he alerted and probably saved many lives in the platoon, because there were snipers out there or whatever that the dog picked up on. But and then of course I'd hear these stories about dog fights, and if a dog attacks you, how you stop it, and you just put your fist down his throat and choke him to death, things like that. Where I was just sitting there listening to this thing, oh my God.
But also, like, think about it as a little girl, I'm hearing these stories of like, yeah, if a dog ever bites you, just shove his fist like down his throat. You're like, okay.
That, in a way it makes sense, but another way it's going to be painful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you enjoy making sculptures of animals?
I like the kind of the fantasy aspect of that more than I do, because fantasy work doesn't have to be perfect. That's something that comes. Yeah. Now, if you get into equestrian art, and you know that I know some artists that are just amazing, you know, and everything is perfect. And on my pieces, I like to put clothing on my animals, and my figures are usually nude. So it's a challenge to figure out how to put a rabbit in a pair of pants.
I mean, my dog loves wearing clothes.
Does he though? Does he?
He does, yeah. He knows where all of his clothes are in the closet, and he'll bark for a certain shirt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. really does.
When I get, so Domi loves doing cards for like everything. So we get cards for every holiday. And now that we have a 1-year-old, my 1-year-old gets cards, and her dog and cat, Peanut and Puddin', have their own like stamp. And so it's like stamps from them.
It's their
really
paw print
cute
with their signature.
It's very cute.
That's cute. What a great idea.
So moving on to the next monument, the Korean War Monument. So in 1950, America entered this war, and about 7,000 men represented York County, 63 of which gave their lives. So Mom's piece is a life-size soldier kneeling on the grave of a killed comrade. His gun stands with the firing end facing down, and then there's a helmet on the butt of the gun with his boots on the ground.
Right. In 2009, a brand new monument went into York's Expo Center at the fairgrounds, and 2,000 people attended the unveiling, with many more pilgrimaging, I can't talk, to set the sights on the 16-foot tall memorial. And Lorann designed a Vietnam monument to include 3 life-size American men, and above them on a tall pillar of stone stands a bronze eagle.
85 York County men gave their lives in the Vietnam War, but if you go down to the York County Courthouse, you'll actually read 101 names. That's because it took into account the deaths of the Vietnam era, not necessarily just Vietnam. So one of the questions we had before Domi has a question, so this picture stands out to me because it's there's a lot more like emotion in this piece than in your other ones. There's like the movements and the men, they're kind of grabbing him and it looks like he's falling. Where did the inspiration behind that come from?
And actually one of those is supposed to be a field nurse.
Oh, really?
I didn't mention that. I didn't tell you that. Yeah. But, right. It's, well, the one with the bandolier was really fun because he's kind of like Rambo, you know, he's really strong and he's, it's like leave no one behind, you know, so that's basically what they're doing. Yeah. And it was really a challenge to build that, make that bronze so that when the granite came, the feet fit on the steps.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, if you're off by a couple inches, it's not going to work. So it went together really well, and Kinsley's helped us put that together. Yeah.
So to put you on the spot a little bit, how do you want to be remembered?
Remember, I'm just feel I'm very fortunate, you know, and I don't want to give up, and I don't want to become old and not know where I am. Or, you know, it's like I just. But then on the other hand, I just like to hide away. You know, I don't really want to be anywhere when I have to.
What? You don't like public speaking?
No. I can do it. I would rather do it, and I really appreciate people that can do it on the fly. Just do it.
Well, I'll tell you, when you showed up today, Jamie was like, "You're here!"
Yeah, I didn't forget. We didn't have much contact through all that, you know. And I mean, the date when I had saw the dates, I thought, well, let's pick the closest one and get it over with. But it turned out to be a good weekend because there isn't a whole lot going on other than the car show and the hot rods. And,
well, yeah, it's like you either like hot rods or sculptures.
Yeah,
so we got
I appreciate everybody coming down, and we're also here. Well, I was called, when I was called, I was like, okay, I love the museum. I want to help the museum, and this is a fundraiser for the museum. They need a new roof, so it's a great thing, and I'm glad that everybody loves this place.
Well,
I do.
A little bit more of the backstory. She got a call from Judith, and she was like, "Hey, I want to do something for Indian Steps Museum. Like they need some support." And she's like, "Can you do something?" And I'm like, "We can.
Yes.
If you come and talk with us." Like, so I kind of roped her into it.
Well, when she called me, I called you. I said, "This is a great, venue for you because it works right in with what you do."
Yep. Oh yeah.
So it's perfect. And plus, I can come down and see the museum again.
Yeah.
Since I dropped the sculpture off, probably. Well, maybe once to one of the Indian, when they do the powwows. I think I did come down to one of those. Yeah. Ran out of gas on the way home.
So now let's get into Lafayette at the Golden Plow Tavern. So York County has a really rich history when we look at colonial history, and that's because the Articles of Confederation were written right here when Continental Congress spent 9 months in our town. So while they were here in the winter of 1777 up until 1778, it was probably the height in which George Washington had reached his unpopularity. So in other words, his approval ratings would have dropped drastically.
And at the time, it was because Washington had been losing battle after battle, and Philadelphia had ended up falling to the British, as well as Brandywine and Germantown, and he wasn't looking like the best leader at the time. So at the time, an ambitious general named Horatio Gates proved his own capabilities as a leader, and he won the Second Battle of Saratoga, shifting the war in America's favor. In short, Washington's underling had upstaged him, and a small group of leaders started shifting loyalties out of Washington's favor, and things just didn't look good for him at that time.
Nope. So while in York, Marquis de Lafayette, he was a French nobleman and he was later an American military officer. He joined Continental Congress. He and Washington had a pretty deep respect for one another and they had grown very close. So Lafayette had caught wind of what was happening with the pro-Gates, anti-Washington talk. So he seized an opportunity to display his loyalty one evening at the Gates home. So at the Gates house on Market Street in York, a group of men met for dinner, and he knew that there were some Washington detractors who would be in the crowd. So he lifted his glass to toast his commander.
And this is the toast that is touted as the toast that saved America. So not many people can say that their toast helped save America. And that's because no one dared to argue with the toast. Lafayette had discreetly shamed Washington's critics for their backstabbery and reinforced his own loyalties at that dinner.
So Mama, up to this point, you had to research a dog, you had to look at a Korean monument, you had the Vietnam monument, and now you have to go back in colonial history. Tell us about how you do your research.
Well, I go right through Chad's Ford on my way to the Foundry, which is, the Foundry is close to Philadelphia, and I stopped at the there at the at the park, and there Lafayette stayed there. There's a couple of beautiful stone homes on top of the hill, and I get some books there on him, and he actually mixed and matched some like uniforms. So it wasn't, an exact, and I could just sort of come up with something that looked good.
Were you happy then?
Yeah. It was kind of a relief, really, because people, the historians will come and count the buttons and make sure that they're, things are perfect. And, but it still was a challenge to do that, and I have that book. So
are those different colors on that sculpture, or is it all one color?
Well, the metal's all one. I get this question a lot. When there are multi-colors on a piece, it's all bronze, but we use chemicals to create different colors on the metal with the reaction of the metals and heat. So they use a torch to put and cuprate nitrate to make the blue-green color. It's very toxic too. Can really make you sick. I know. But and the brown color is ferric nitrate, so you're really working with a lot of chemicals, and there's all other kinds of recipes for colors that these are the colors that hold up the best outdoors. So that's generally what I will use on something. Yeah, the other pretty colors, they don't last out in the sunlight.
I didn't realize that. So the last piece is we're getting into the workers at the Agricultural and Industrial Museum.
So this was dedicated as part of York County's 250th anniversary. In 1999, a new sculpture went into the old Agricultural and Industrial Museum. Workers of York pays homage to the men and women who built. Like the tinker, it symbolizes the people who show up to work every day, working tirelessly to both earn a paycheck and contribute to their society.
This sculpture shows 3 men and 1 woman, and also an eagle at the top, which is said to be a symbol for freedom and prosperity in this setting. It's 11 feet tall, and it's on a 7-foot block of black granite weighing over 2,000 pounds. to come up with a name, there was a contest where they put it out to the public for them to submit different names. They got a total of 348 different entries, but ultimately the Workers of York won out. So our question for you is, do you like the name? Like,
Yeah,
you didn't get to name your own
great.
work.
Oh, that's fine. You know, that involves more people, you know, into the project. So that was great.
Do you feel like your art has drawn the respect that it's due?
I think so. Well, one piece that amazed me was the Tinker, all the how much feedback I got from that, because I almost didn't do it because I thought, well, I don't want to do any more pieces for, you know, outdoor. I'm done. I quit one of those times. But Patrick Sells, who had done a lot of the industrial art that's around town, he was in charge of the project, the George Street project, and he needed 6 artists. He called me like 3 times. I said no, and the 4th time he said, I need help with this. I said, why didn't you say that in the first place? I'd be glad to help you. So it wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Patrick's persistence. And when you said I was at the kitchen table with a pen and paper, I did a stick drawing. I mean, I cannot really draw good. If I have to draw for, you know, an application for a job, I'm like, oh, no, this is awful. But so I actually did a stick drawing, but the name, I think, was what sold the piece to them. So the Tinker. Because it's such a stupid name, but it's cute. You know, it's catchy kind.
So now we're just going to go through a quick snapshot. So that was our deep dive into about 10 pieces, but there are dozens more around. So another one is Leo the Lion down at Red Lion area senior high. This is actually one that I remember that you were making a rib cage, and I remember being a child and you asking if I wanted to help, and I had to like touch the wax and kind of maneuver it. I had no idea that this is going to be on display for what, like, you know, it could be there for hundreds of years potentially.
That's a great school. I mean, it's beautiful. Looks like a corporate headquarters. Yeah, the line, and that's all freehand and wax. That's just, and I made a video. I had one of those big old cameras, and I had a whole video of the whole project from start to finish, and I left that out in my car, and my car got broken into down there, and they stole my camera with the tape in it. So,
so somewhere there's the videotape.
Somewhere.
Another one is outside of Central Market, called Gift from Market. Yep. We have the girl in the sundress at Cherry Lane Farm. I'm sorry, Cherry Lane, York. That's my mom's bee company. Yeah, that was not a plug.
Yeah, free plug.
We also have the Appels. So this is at their private residence. And you were approached by them to make this?
Oh, that story took several years to get that done, you know, to get the idea of what Jody wanted. She called me one day and she said, I'd like a sculpture of Louis. And I knew Louis was a real private person, didn't even like to have his photograph taken. And I thought, why does she want a sculpture of Louis? He really wouldn't like, you know, I don't think he would like that. But I didn't realize how sick he was. And then a few years later, he passed away, and I was able to, to meet with her. She wanted to meet and talk about doing something for him. And this is about maybe 3 years after he passed away. I don't know, quite a while. On all these projects, usually a great amount of time goes by. But she said, okay, I want me, and I want Louis, and I want our dog. And sitting on, they sent a bench out from the garden for me to use, you know, so that I can make it fit. And that's what they did when we delivered them. They put them back on a teak bench up on the hilltop, where next to Louis' chapel, where they're both buried right now. And but a funny story. Chris Paulus, who is their groundskeeper, told me, he said, I would drive Jody up to see Louis, and she would talk to the dog. She didn't really say much to Louis, but she loved the dog. So I must have got that, you know, and we're only working from two photographs of the dog. So I was hoping I could get close to what she had for Tigger. Yeah, so
Well, if she talked to it,
mu-
she clearly thought
yeah,
it was good.
it must have been good.
And then you texted me some pictures of the cat that you made for them as well.
Oh, that was the last piece. And sometimes artists will say, oh, well, there's a certain age where people stop buying art. You know, old people don't buy art. Well, she was 100 years old when she commissioned that. And I thought, so that story, you know, that's out the window. But, and that cat was, I think he had 4 different smiles until I got, you know, I would just, they say, no, we don't want to see, we want to see more teeth, and we, you know, or make the teeth like a picket fence. And so I just cut out the smile and do another one. And but it was fun. It was fun to do that. It was a challenge to do that. And I love the story. And they're Alice in Wonderland collectors. That's how I kind of got connected with them, was through the Alice in Wonderland pieces. Yeah.
Now you sent me this picture, but we can get a chance to talk. What happened there?
Oh, that's part of the process. When, you know, I did send you some wax too, but when they're cast, since they were done in pieces, we open up the castings in some places because they're dipped into a liquid material, and that has to dry inside and out. And also that helps to create a place for that, because you're making a mold on both sides of the wax for that wax to grab. So when the metal's poured in there, the pressure doesn't just break it.
Oh, and that's what this is, right? Like there you can see the
right.
cat,
That's
and then these are the pieces that then get individual
yeah, those
pieces
are
that get
what we call the
cast.
patches that are cut out. And actually this gets put in a like a hooded kiln, and they melt all that wax out. And it's got a coating on it though. You know, that the mold, ceramic mold is put on that first, then they melt the wax out, and then flip it back over, and they can pour. So this is actually the pour cup at the bottom. That becomes the cup that they pour the bronze into.
So literally that cat is flipped upside down,
Right.
and then molten metal eventually, once you get the cast, is poured into that.
Poured into that, they can do like 8 pieces at a time. That way they stand the pieces up in a sand bed and pack the sand, shovel the sand. It takes about 3 people to shovel sand in there really quickly, so because they're heated and they don't want them to cool down, and it's dusty, and it's kind of exciting. And when they pour the metal in, it kind of shoots out a little bit. When it's full, it comes out the vents and it squirts out.
And it's yellow, right? It's like
yeah, it's
orange.
like the sun. It's like lava. Yeah.
I'm beginning to sense you're a little bit of adrenaline junkie. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it would be, but the 2.5-hour drive down there and back kind of wears that off.
Yeah. You also kind of like macabre, kind of dark stuff. You do skeleton horses.
Well, I love bones, and I love fossils. I have pictures of fossils that I'm thinking, oh my God, how can I make a sculpture out of this dead thing? But the horse was kind of fun. The challenge was the rib cage, because I did that in like 3 pieces. I think I slid it right down the middle of the wide section, and the front was like a bucket shape. So I figured out how to cast that. And
you like your like you said, what do you call it? Fantasy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humpty Dumpty. These I have a first edition of Through the Looking Glass, and there's actually a Humpty in there with his mouth open just like that. Yeah, but I didn't see that until after I made that.
Oh, really?
So that was right. I was looking at one, and I turned the page, and I thought, oh my God, there it is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And one of your most recent pieces at Memorial Hospital.
That was a piece that was pretty stressful, because I didn't want to do the ribbon in bronze. I thought, let's do it in stainless steel, and I'll take it to Cot Camp Steel. And I took a little model I made out of aluminum, and it was about this big, and I said, I know you guys could do this. Give me a quote. And it took them a couple of weeks before I got any kind of a response from them. And they did. It was amazing. They just bent it. Yeah.
It looks
welded
great.
it. Yeah. Yeah, but that was, and then I had to paint it.
Oh, you painted that?
I didn't want to. I thought, I don't really want it. It was pretty. I thought, I don't want to paint this. Paints, but it did look pretty good after I got it under there with a sponge, and that's how I painted it.
Okay.
It was a mess.
It's not for our final questions.
Yeah. So what is your all-time favorite piece that you've made?
Most favorite. Oh. Well, I have, I don't, of course, all the veterans think, they say, this is our favorite, I don't want to insult anybody. I love all those pieces and all those men that I work for. But I have a little garden piece that's down in Bethesda somewhere that has a beautiful, it's a nude little black girl, and she's just, she's got a daisy from, he loves me not, pulling the petals off the daisy. And I had that piece in my garage for about 3 years, and I didn't really like it because one hand bothered me, and I thought, why don't you just cut it off and make a new hand? You can do that. So I still have that hand that I cut off, but after I did that, it sold right away. I mean, and it was just a nice, delicate, more a hand with a little more expression and dainty. It was dainty, and the hand that I cut off is kind of chunky, and that's my fear of the new piece that's in the foundry now. That the finger. Oh no, I don't want to do that again.
What are you working on now?
Oh, it's just a new piece that I had in my basement. I had the pattern in there. I think it's sat on the table. I don't throw anything away. It's sat on my table for maybe 9 years, and it didn't get broken. So I thought, okay, I need a quick piece for the summer. And I had some wonderful stainless steel wings, extra wings that I had made from the piece up at the hospital. And I thought, this is perfect. Just use her, and you can put the wings on there. Sure. It took a lot longer to get that ready than I thought, but it's in the foundry now, so that'll be a new piece.
You mentioned before that you really like making your rabbits too, so I wanted to show them all. So this is the rabbit
with his clothes on,
the pants, and then and this is at the State Museum, right? There's one there.
There's one up at the Pennsylvania State Museum in Harrisburg, and Louis has one in his garden, and I made 2 last year for somebody, one in Delaware and another one. The Jewelry Barn has a piece. I can go in there and buy jewelry, and she said, I want a rabbit. That worked out well. I can go back and buy more jewelry.
Yeah, say I'll trade you.
Yeah.
And this kind of shows you then like how mom has to cut her pieces. Like so you make it in wax, then you have to cut it up so then when you show up to the foundry they can cast it. So it's just kind of like more of the behind the scenes stuff that you don't see.
Right. It's it's hard to cut them up.
So that brings us to our takeaways from today. So what is worth remembering? We took you on a tour of the monuments around our community that signal our values. The men and the women who sacrifice their lives for their country, athletes who symbolize excellence and giving back to their community, the importance of children and their folklore stories, and our rich industrial past, and of course the indigenous peoples who lived full lives on the very land that we stand. This is a story about sculptures for sure, but also about a woman, Lorann Jacobs, and how she's very rare as a artist, and her craft really was this pioneering effort, even against a lot of headwinds from the time period. Yeah, and Lorann Jacobs will go down in history as a catalyst in the 21st century Renaissance of York County's creative community. Alongside the large-scale murals of York, Jacobs' work showed the outdoors installations could enhance streetscapes and add layers of interest and energy to otherwise routine and worn places.
So we're going to allow you to ask questions here in a second. Before we do that, we want to do a quick plug for our next episode. It'll be 1 month from today, June 1st. We're going to get on to Gettysburg.
July 1st.
I'm sorry, July 1st at Gettysburg. And we're going to talk about York County's role specifically in Hanover during the Civil War. And that one totally is going to be in Domi's wheelhouse because of her Civil War knowledge.
I might show up in uniform, I don't know.
So at this point, we'd love to open it up to questions if you have any for Mom.
Question.
That's
Your
right.
big piece in Continental Square, how many pieces did you have to cut that into?
I think it was probably at least 14 pieces.
And then you have to weld them all back together on site?
Oh, now, well, it's welded down in the foundry, and patina and everything is done down there. And then we shipped it up to York. We had a big crane come in, and we had from Rock of Ages the granite delivered, and a big guy came down with the granite to set it, and he was like he had a big jaw, and he was a big macho man, and I thought, oh no, here we go. They lowered this thing down, and it has pins on the bottom to anchor it underneath, and like go into the granite, and it didn't quite, maybe a pin might have been off a little bit or hole. Well, that's another story. I had a drill for him, a water drill set up with it had a brace, and you could just put it on there and it makes a straight hole. Well, I don't need that. And I just drill these holes. And one of the holes might have been a little bit, but it wouldn't go down all the way. It was like a ½ an inch gap. Mm. And it was at the end of the day, at the end of the weekend, and everybody was tired. And he looked at me and he said, "You're not going to make me take that off of there, are you?" I said, "Take it off. Take it off. Take it off." Yeah. And that would have been awful. You know, it didn't fit.
But he was going to let it sit ½ an inch.
Yeah, he was just going to. He wanted to go home. He was tired. He was, down from Vermont, and of course, he didn't want me to tell him what to do either. Sometimes you have to, but yeah, that's just goes to show you can get all the way through a project and get it right to the end, and it can still kind of get, messed up. So.
How long does it take you to make a sculpture like the thinker from start to end?
Maybe a year, from start to finish. As the pieces go through foundry, it takes a couple of months to get them through there. And then if there's any kind of backup in there, I need people to help me down there. I have to wait until usually they're pretty good. They're really good. They try. They bend over backwards to help me. Yeah. But I've been with them since 1993, and they're just great.